Before we kick off, I just wanted to give some updates from our end, because I know we talked about kind of the future of the network and the Justice and Innovation Group last meeting. So that was particularly pressing at the time because the Network for Justice was facing a potential shortfall of funding at the end of the year. I'm really pleased to say that funding for the network has been confirmed, at least for the next 6 months, which gives us at least 2 more Justice and Innovation Group sessions. And we'll be using that 6 months to work on our strategy, define our direction, and clarify our communications. And this will include work around the Justice and Innovation Group as well. Thank you so much to those of you who completed the feedback on the future of the Justice and Innovation Group and what that should look like. I will actually recirculate that at the end of the meeting, because it would be great to get some additional views on that. But there does look to be emerging some good consensus items about what we should be doing, essentially using this group to provide practical support to allow organisations at the front line to interact with technology and innovative opportunities, but there's also the opportunity there to develop, and that's something that we'll probably need additional resourcing for. So it's something that I'll revisit at future sessions, but I might also follow up with a couple of you who have indicated an interest in being part of those conversations. Okay, so we're going to get started. We're going to start as usual with some updates on tools being developed and used in the community. This time is quite exciting because we get to see 2 existing tools that we've previously showcased in the past. So we're going to be looking for some updates and developments on those. I'm going to pass over to Alex and Anka from Monaco Solicitors, who are going to be demoing their tool. It recently won the Law Society Excellence Awards in Technology and Innovation. So very exciting to hear what you have for us. Over to you guys.
Hi, thanks very much, Martha. Hi, everyone. I'm very honoured to, talk to all you guys again. And, I know that, you guys are really the backbone of the access to justice community in the UK. It's a cause close to my heart. I did start out in legal aid myself, and I was volunteering at FRU and Luton Law Centre. I actually got into employment law in the end because I had a family when I was quite young, and I couldn't actually pay the bills, but I found in employment law you could help people and still have a business as well. So I ended up going down the business route, but never kind of forgot my roots. And what I ended up doing was making this new tool. We have just won the Law Society Tech and Innovation Award for 2021. And without further ado, I'm going to demo that and then talk to you about how you could get involved, and lots of time for questions. So a quick demo and then mainly questions, really. So this is our website. It's got a video explaining how this tool works. And as you can see, we've got this award from the Law Society. So we did win the tech category. And we managed to make the front page of the Gazette as well last week. So quite proud of that. And we got a grant from Innovate UK. So very grateful to the government to help fund this project. So this is just a website. As you can see, you don't have to log in. There's no login, there's no details, there's no paywall. You could put a link to this on your website, for example. And if you do employment law, that is, but I will talk about other areas of law, but let's kind of do a case here. So you might go through, and then, perhaps sickness, absence, and perhaps redundancy. Why were you dismissed? Problematic selection criteria, performance, pregnancy, maternity case. At this point, you're asked to put your details in. So here we've got an example of someone who was fired unfairly when they had a baby, and then they had to look after their father who was diagnosed with a heart condition. Sadly, this happens all too often. At this point, perhaps your advisors on your team would be handling this, or perhaps your users direct. They will then need to select the most appropriate paragraphs. What they end up with is an advice note telling them about their rights. So time limits here, whether you're employed for over 2 years. If any you do employment, those are the 2 big kind of banana skins to look out for, right? Time limits and whether you've been employed for 2 years. Stuff about performance, taking sick leave and so on. pregnancy, maternity discrimination. And then not only that, it also does all the key documents for an employment law case. So this is a letter that you would write to the other side. You could adapt this into an advice letter to your own client. Depending on what the employer replies, you could select the next option, and here it does a grievance. So this is a formal grievance letter. Again, using really top quality content that most litigants in person couldn't probably do for themselves. And that's it really. So I just want to hand over to Anka, and perhaps just a few words. Anka joined us. Maybe you could just describe a little bit just your journey and how this affected it.
Of course, yeah. My name is Anka. I'm a trainee solicitor at Monaco Solicitors, and I joined the company roughly 5 months ago. And when I started, I was a recent law graduate. I had done employment law as one of my optional modules. But when I started, I found I had very little knowledge about employment law in actual practice. So when I joined, I was asking questions such as, what's without prejudice? What's the time limitation? Just certain things that we were just never really taught in school. And I really struggled to kind of bridge the gap between the kind of theoretical side and the actual practice. And that's kind of where Virtual Lawyer came in. So a lot of my writing style as well was very much just, it was formatted for the university style of answering questions as opposed to sounding like an actual legal professional. And Virtual Lawyer really did help me with that in terms of just helping me create the foundation for my drafting and make sure that everything that I wrote did sound relatively professional, as close as I could, which then with the help of my senior solicitors became really great letters. And in the end, we ended up getting really good results for some of our clients and getting settlement agreements for them, which has been fantastic. So that's been my journey so far. Thanks so much, Anka. And in terms of how you guys can get involved, we're looking to partner up with up to 10 large organizations, or perhaps maybe a slightly larger number of smaller organizations, to work together with this. We've already got a couple of people. So most of you probably know Eddie Copinger from University House. We're on Eddie's website here. He's linking there to the Virtual Lawyer tool. This is the University of Surrey, which is where Anka studied. They are linking to us here. So, there's a couple of ways we can help each other. What we'd ask from you, if you want to get involved, we'd ask you to link to our website. And obviously you've got the tool there, so just link to that tool. That also helps us with Google Juice as well, because we are actually, trying to run a business as well through Google. And the other thing we can do as well is, if you do have cases which you think have got merit, but perhaps the litigant can't afford representation, but really deserves a solicitor, we can take those on a no-win, no-fee basis as well, and then represent them so that they will have a brand behind them with a logo, an award-winning brand that you may think that they may get a fairer outcome. Sadly, the way the world works, I think, is the access to justice world works. If you've got representation, you're much more likely to get a fairer outcome. So without further ado, I'd like to throw the floor open for any questions on any of this, or any other, if also, just final word, if people are also interested in using it for other areas of law, we're working with University House to adapt this for domestic violence law, and also disability benefits appeals, which could really shake up the whole disability benefits appeal system. And then with Exeter University on housing and wills and probate. So the system we have made is adaptable for other areas of law. We can help you, to dovetail your knowledge into a similar website, basically. So, yeah.
Hi, folks. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to join the session this morning. A number of familiar faces. So, yeah, and this is my first time here. So, yeah, just here to give a quick update and a quick demo of what we've been up to in the last 3 months. So, as a quick recap, what is Valor? Well, Valor is a DIY law platform that helps litigants in person to manage and run their own employment case. And progress so far. So my colleague Danae demoed at JIG in September, and since then we've shipped some major new features, which I'm going to demo in a second. We've joined the Law Tech Sandbox. I saw Warren here from the SRA. So we've been working with the SRA, the FCA, and also the lovely folks at BSB as well, in terms of understanding regulatory requirements. We've been running pilots with a number of charities and university legal clinics as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then most importantly, we've secured some R&D funding, and we would like to involve some folks from this community if possible. And I'll talk about that in a second. And don't worry, there aren't that many slides. I will keep to time in case Martha is wondering. So in terms of the kind of major, two of the major features that we've kind of released, the first one is this kind of much better organization of the information and the tools inside the platform itself. So from working with our users and people on the platform, we find that it's easiest to kind of explain what they need to do in almost three pillars is what we call it. So the first pillar is like, what's the evidence? What's the claim that you think you have a claim for? What's the goal, right? As you all know, sometimes people might not know whether, they're in emotional distress, but they might not know the actual goal that they want. So we're trying to provide guidance and help them along there. Then there's a second bit, which is around the letter. So it was really interesting to see Monaco and the letter tool. So we're looking and we're developing something a little bit similar to that and providing some calculators. And then the organizational aspects of tasks, the documents, and the communication. So to show that in practice, you'll see that the three pillars are now reflected in alongside here. So my situation, so the story, what we call my story, but effectively it's a case chronology, has existed. And since last time, you can now add your event, but also upload any evidence that's related to that event. So like employment contract for when you start your employment inside here, or any kind of emails. The evidence section, which is specifically to do with any documents related or emails related to that you think backs up your claim. And then there's some new sections, which is around legal research. And here we're trying to, we know that a lot of the people that we've come across vary in terms of their knowledge and ability to understand like which parts of the law is relevant for them. So we do link out to, credible sources like CAB, and try and provide as many pointers as possible. There's also a goal section where we provide more information about what and how they should be thinking about this. And in the future, we're planning to provide a much more detailed schedule of loss calculator in here as well. And then lastly, being able to put in the respondent and the claimant's details in here. The organization still stays the same, so that they can track any communications that they have, any documents, and any tasks. So that's the kind of first part of the update. The other next big feature that has been requested lots is this idea of being able to forward emails on. And it really comes from two common problems that we see our users encountering over and over again. So in employment cases, a lot of that evidence is in the form of emails, but it's sometimes not really easy to store those Outlook.emi files. I mean, you could copy and paste, in theory, you could copy and paste and put it in one giant Word document. But it's cumbersome to do that with lots and lots of emails, and being able to find them is really difficult as well then. And also, we find that some people, especially those that are less digitally confident, when we ask them to download and upload documents, they're just like, I don't know, and I'm on my mobile phone, how do I do this? And so what we've done now is added a new feature where every case has a unique email address. And what they can do is they could take that email, and the idea would be that they would, on their mobile phone, being able to forward emails using that unique address, and then the email itself will appear here as well as any attachments. So for instance, this is a test email, so you could see it's a lot of, not a real email, but any sort of, and this can apply to screenshots or anything like that. And we think this is, we've seen people use this, and the way that we want to evolve this, which I will come to in a second, is this idea of the Valor as a virtual assistant for your tribunal case, which where you could then copy Valor into email correspondence and it be able to even keep track of everything. So instead of lots of emails everywhere. So when we were working on this, we realized that a lot of A2J organizations have really similar problems. So claimants might find what we call very creative ways to send over their documents. So they might take even a digital document and take screenshots and trying to send that over, or to take, photos or paper copies. And what you end up on the other side that you have to do is try to take all of these pages and stitch them together into an actual document again. They might not always be sure what to upload or what to send, so they might send too much information. And then also ordering, so if you get quite a few emails in, ordering and trying to sort those can be take a lot of administrative time. So on our next R&D project that we've secured funding for, we are working on two main things, which is all around machine learning and AI. First thing is to use AI to stitch together images from the same document. So working out, is this the same document? I've got 10 images. Are they the same thing? Do they overlap? Can I actually stitch one entire document together again? And then for the second kind of major feature, this is, I call this a bit of magic. And this is my dream. The dream is that as a claimant, or even on the other side, as someone who deals with a lot of, has to kind of build a mini bundle, that you can get all of the emails forwarded to you, and the AI will actually read the email and work out and start to build a little case chronology for you. And so it sounds like magic, but it is imminently doable. There's just quite a few things to work out. So if you recognize any of these issues, we're actually putting together a working group chaired by Sarah Stevens. So Sarah is on the call today. And what we would like to do is would like to look for 3 to 4 other organizations. So we've got one already who is participating in the group. And basically our preference would be from folks that are willing to trial this as part of their kind of intake or casework process. And effectively, the working group will be maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks for about half an hour. And the idea is that we really want to build something that alongside the problems that you're seeing in the sector itself. And so rather than us going off into a silo and building something that we think people want, we actually want to work with folks who do this on a daily basis. So if any of you are interested, please email Sarah. She's also on the call, message her. And in terms of me, always happy to say hi, especially if you're in Scotland where it is very cold, but drop me an email. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'm over time. I'm sorry, Martha, but I hope that's okay.
You're forgiven, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, all the presentations were hugely inspiring and demonstrate the enormous possibilities that digital can bring in access and justice. However, it's a bit overwhelming, you know, when you're running a law centre. And what I want to know from any or all of the presenters, from the concept to the delivery, what was your lead-in time I mean, funding's a whole separate matter, but what time frame did it take from someone going, do you know what, we can do this, to implementing it?
I'm happy to take that one. Hi, Julie. And yeah, good question. I think from concept, it was in chain in around 2019, but when we really kicked into gear was when coronavirus pandemic hit, and we were just literally overwhelmed with inquiries at that point, which we just couldn't get to. So from that time, bearing in mind it was already in chain, so we already had an in-house team of developers. We were already working on similar and more simplistic apps. So from that time to production release was probably about a year or so. But in that journey involved hiring a data science team in-house. We did everything in-house, and deploying. What I would caution is just this idea that you could just get a load of tech people to sort this out, because the domain specialists are the tricky people to get. So you need your lawyers who are actually like logically minded, who can plug themselves into a kind of coding programming frame of mind. That's quite rare, because lawyers are taught to kind of, go from case law, and every case is different. So to try and like compartmentalize the law into pigeonholes, which code works very much in a kind of much more scientific way, is the real challenge. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I'd recommend it. Going from scratch, it really is a titanic struggle. And frankly, if we hadn't, won these awards, I'm not sure if it would have been worth it, because the recognition, people don't necessarily want to take it seriously. Tech, there's always that late adopter kind of tendency as well, especially if you're deploying into a community which is not always going to be tech literate, and it's not always going to be kids on their smartphones. You could be deploying into different demographics. It is tough to develop one of these things. I mean, I'm happy to talk to you further offline, but yeah, it's you'd have to really jump in with both feet, and I would have quite a committed team, and I would get a budget mapped out and put some zeros on that as well once you've mapped it out.
That's really helpful. Sounds like partnership working is the possible solution to embracing all this technology.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alex.
Pleasure.
Thanks so much, Alex. Thanks, Julie, as well. And yeah, it's exactly these type of things that maybe this group could be really helpful for, in terms of really raising and defining the issues, and then seeking out partners who are willing to take that risk and take that leap and do some joined up delivery and design. Thank you. Thanks so much to all of you for speaking and questions. That's brilliant. And to assisted digital. So we've been discussing assisted digital as a group in a number of different formats over the last 20 months. We've included it in our Reaching Excluded Communities work. We've also included it when we've been looking at building in digital access points to existing services. And before we enter into our discussions today, I just want to really highlight the difference between some of the elements that I think we're all concerned about. So for me in particular, these are supporting users who are digitally excluded first, then supporting engagement with the justice system more broadly, and then finally providing advice as a key element to meaningful access to justice. That just struck me as kind of some of the key points that we're focused on in this group. We'll be hearing some examples of best practice where these elements combine, but I'm really hopeful that we can use this session to learn more about the key principles involved in digital exclusion, and explore how we can use a range of different services to ensure marginalised users, particularly those who experience digital exclusion, can navigate the range of services that they need. So to kick off our discussion, really happy to be joined today by Joe Hines from the Public Law Project, who's going to be giving us an overview of their research and roundtable work on digital exclusion and support. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks very much, Martha. Hi everyone, it's lovely to meet you all. I'm Jo, as Martha says. I'm a research fellow in online courts at the Public Law Project. And I'm going to talk briefly about some of the work public law projects are doing on assisted digital services. But I say briefly because I'm conscious that there'll be people on the call who have direct experience possibly of delivering these services who might also want to chip in at some point. But for our part at Public Law Project, we've been interested in the rollout of assisted digital services for a number of years now. It falls under our public law and technology focus area. And particularly, we've been interested in the role of assisted digital services like in the wider justice landscape and how it fits together with other forms of advice provision. So looking at the kind of whole journey for people. So we published a report earlier this year in May, which looked specifically at assisted digital support in HMCTS reform services, which is obviously called digital support. And with this, we really wanted to summarise what we knew about the service, which then was in a pilot phase and was being delivered by Good Things Foundation, and also what we thought we needed to know about the service. So we reviewed the available literature, we submitted a lot of FOI requests, spoke to participating centres and had some really, really helpful conversations with Good Things Foundation and with HMCTS. So just to give you a couple of headlines from a report in terms of possible improvements that we found. Firstly, we found that the funding model, so this is where centres get paid, the participating centres delivering these appointments, where they get paid per service per person, meant that it was sometimes quite difficult for centres to offer support throughout the entirety of an individual's digital support journey, and that was quite difficult. And this was because centres were only eligible to be paid once per government digital service, for example, a PIP appeal or a civil money claim, and this was regardless of the number of digital support appointments that an individual required for that particular service. And that also speaks to what the Good Things Foundation noted in their evaluation too, about people needing additional support beyond the digital assistance. So whether that's legal or procedural or emotional support, and providing that was really crucial for the digital support appointments themselves to be effective. Secondly, in the final phase of the pilot, there were no participating centres delivering digital support in the North East, in Yorkshire and the Humber, in Lancashire and in Cumbria, which obviously, whilst acknowledging the limitations of a pilot, we were quite concerned about, particularly because these areas which are hotspots for digital exclusion and advice deserts to some extent more generally. So that was a bit of a concern for us. But off the back of this report, we hosted a private roundtable discussion in June of this year with 17 stakeholders and interested parties, which was chaired by Sir Ernest Ryder, and the discussion focused on 4 key themes of digital support. So we looked at delivery, funding, additional support, and thinking about the objectives of digital support and where it sits in the wider justice landscape. So that was really great, and we were really, really grateful to Ernest and all the participants for a really rich discussion and really open as well, which was really, really helpful. But again, a couple of quick headlines from that discussion. First, there was very strong support for delivering digital advice alongside legal advice, which is happening to some degree already within the pilot, and I'm sure with the national rollout when it happens. And this allowed users to move between different types and different levels of advice quite smoothly, and they didn't feel they were being endlessly signposted. And there was also strong support for co-location of services and offering face-to-face appointments in familiar locations. And secondly, it was suggested that we need to better understand the level of need for digital support, including the nature of a target group, their behaviours and their typical journeys into and out of digital support services. So I'll put both of these papers into the chat in a moment, but in terms of next steps for us, we're looking to conduct a longer term research project on assisted digital services more broadly, so including digital support for HMCTS services, but also the services for other government departments and agencies are running to get a sense of how that all fits together and see the whole sort of picture of assisted digital across these different digital services. So yeah, thank you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from We Are Digital and Govan Community Project as well. So thanks, Martha.
Thanks so much, Joe, and thanks for your continued work in this area. It's really useful to have these reports as a really strong foundation of evidence on which to work from. So as Joe mentioned, assisted digital is a really key strand of work under the court reform programme. As more court services move to an online entry point, HMCTS is developing support services to help users who may not have digital capacity to navigate the system online. We Are Digital have just been awarded the new contract. I'm really pleased to have David Smith here from the organisation to walk us through their plans. Thank you for joining us, David, and over to you.
No problem. Thanks ever so much. And very interesting to hear from Joe there. I'd be very interested to see some of the research. That'll definitely help us with some additional insight. I'd just like to, if I can, try and share my screen to give you a little bit of a presentation on what we're all about, and hopefully that will give you a little bit more information about us and also the system that we're looking to provide. Hopefully you can see that okay. Can you nod, Martha, if you can see that all right?
Yes.
Yes, you can. Great stuff. Okay. Well, I'm the Chief Marketing and Sales Officer for We Are Digital, so I head up all the sales and marketing of the business. I'll come on to a little bit more about who we are and what we do, but I'd just like to go through a little bit of the overview and background. I think you probably know a lot of this anyway from what Joe just mentioned. There's obviously been a lot of work and communication through yourselves about the rationale behind this particular project. As you know, it's part of the £1 billion reform service for the HMCTS. I think they class it as the largest one in the world that's going on at the moment. And the whole idea is it's looking to redesign the way that the courts and tribunal services are provided to allow a more efficient and speedier way to allow people access to the services they provide. And obviously looking at technology as a way to do that, but obviously making sure at that time as well that there's nobody being left behind. So the idea here is to increase increase automation, but also, you know, to allow those forms to be provided online and payments to be made online, but to provide services and help to people who may have struggle accessing those services. The timings, just very briefly, and there's a lot more detail later on if people are interested. I'm very interested to hear there about the concerns about the regionalisation of the services that obviously were provided during the pilot. And again, hopefully that'll show that this is a full coverage of England, Wales and Scotland in that regard. So from a timings perspective, yes, there's the Good Things Foundation conducted their pilot. That's now been closed, and there's a report available for anybody to see around that. We were awarded the contract in October this year, and we're now in the mobilisation phase where we're going into the pilot phase of rollout in January, late January, with the mobilisation across the rest of the country from May 22 onwards. In terms of looking at possible barriers, this is very key to anything that is done through digital inclusion. And I think it was indicated there, it's not specifically just the whole digital inclusion element that needs to be taken into consideration. There's skills and confidence. You may have digital inclusion skills, but you may not have the confidence to actually use them. There may be financial constraints to why you can't get involved with some of the activities we're looking to bring here. And having basic access to internet and technology is key and fundamental to being able to access these online services in the first place. We need to make sure there's emotional and mental resources available, and this is the signposting element that's been referred to, and I think that's absolutely vital and something that we feel very strongly about in our own experience of dealing with people in this regard. And it's making sure that people get a trust in the system. People won't use something they can't trust, so we need to make sure that there's something here that allows people access to what they want, where they want it, when they want it. From a digital support perspective, what we're saying here is that the idea is we're looking to resolve those barriers, the things that stop people getting involved in actually going online and using online services. And the whole point here is to say that this is one of a number of options. So paper routes will still remain. This isn't a case of taking everything away and forcing people down a route that they're not comfortable doing. What we're doing is we're providing an alternative, which hopefully will allow it to be more efficient. But if people still aren't happy doing it, therefore they will be able to do normal paper routes as normal. And we know just from our own experience that people, there are multiple causes of digital exclusion that occur, and we need to make sure we're trying to address those if people have anxiety about using a typical service online. But again, as I said, we're not forcing people down a particular route. Our aim is to provide a digital equivalent to what is currently available in a paper format. So a little bit about ourselves and our business. We've got a lot of experience of working with people from a digital exclusion basis. We've worked for over 10 years now in the social housing market, dealing with councils, local authorities, housing associations. We work with charities, and we're providing digital training and inclusion services to all those areas and residents in those areas who found themselves digitally excluded for one reason or another. We also work with corporates such as Lloyds Banking Group to help them with their assisted digital services, about bringing people online, making sure people aren't excluded. And the pandemic recently highlighted, shone a spotlight on what was there already, I think we're all aware of, to bring people into line and allow them the capability to get online and do things that they weren't able to do because of the lockdown situation they found themselves in. And we've also working very closely with central government. So we've got a lot of experience with our assisted digital services, working with the visa office for the Home Office to help people with their online applications for visas. So this is giving them the confidence and the capabilities to fill those forms in online. We do the same with the Windrush compensation scheme. So we're providing assisted digital service there to people who've been affected by the Windrush scandal and helping them to provide to fill the forms in for compensation around that. And that involves reaching out into the communities where those individuals can be found and helping to find them, to show them there is a methodology for them to go through to fill those forms in. And obviously we're working with yourselves, with the HMCTS now and groups that are probably included in this particular call to provide this level of service as well. So we've got first-hand experience of providing that help and support. And that's not only just remotely. Our whole modus operandi prior to COVID was face-to-face, either one-to-one in person or in groups, in terms of training, providing that digital support, but also working with a network of partners around the country to provide support for the Home Office, for example. That's done through a network of centres in different locations around the UK. So we've got a lot of experience around this to provide that support in whatever way is required by the individual at their point of need. So from a high level perspective, the provision that we're looking to provide is to identify those people who actually require the service that we are providing. This will be done through a number of areas and will be signposted through based on marketing and also integration with HMCTS services as well. And that will be through reaching out in terms of our partner network, which I'll come on to in a moment. Very important to this, and I think crucial to what we're trying to do here, is the ability to triage those individuals who are experiencing that digital exclusion. So we're identifying what it is they need from an emotional, practical and procedural perspective. So we can understand, one, obviously the service they're trying to actually access, but also what is the best way for them to actually access that service and the support that's required to continue with that service. And we're also making sure that anyone who's faced with digital exclusion gets that support to access the actual service they need in a meaningful way. One of the key elements that we're very keen on making sure with any of the digital inclusion activities we do is about providing that confidence to the users so that they can self-serve in the future. There's no point just teaching somebody or providing somebody support which makes them feel it's a one shot. We've got to give them confidence that they will be happy, because if they're confident using these services, that will enable them to actually be confident using other services outside of this area. And that to me is a bonus that's wider than the actual HMCTS support that we're providing here. And one of the key elements, and I think it was just touched on there by Joe, is we want to be able to provide this service to anyone regardless of their geographical location. And that's absolutely paramount to what we've been able to achieve with this particular project. So how will this all work? We work on the basis of having a common front door, and this is something that is, I think, very individualistic to what We Are Digital provides. The idea here is that we funnel people through a particular centre where they know they'll be able to get the service they want without having to try and go to multiple locations. And that's where our triage process is very important. I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. So the idea here is that any of the partners we're working with around the countryside will actually have a back-end access to our system and our triage software. So we'll be able to either make sure they are actually being triaged in the same way across the country and getting the service they need, no matter what that happens to be, which means we need a large partnership. And one of the things we're very good at doing is working with partners around the countryside to provide that, as we call, active sort of support in terms of being able to have formal, informal touch points for the individual. So whether you want to walk into a centre, whether you want to talk to somebody on a phone, or whether you want to actually have a video call, or have someone come to your house to help you with support, we're able to do that through the partners that we're mobilizing and through the basis of the expertise and experience that we've got. We call this our hub and spoke approach. So HMCTS use us as a hub to reach out to the marketplace, but we're actually providing what we call a hyper-local approach, so that we're a central hub reaching out to a number of partners. So we work on the basis that we're trying to build a better airport rather than fly the planes. We don't have the expertise in terms of what's required in the marketplace. What we do have is the expertise of bringing that to the people and putting it in the right direction, in the right location that they actually want. And this is found to be very successful in a number of different ways in other projects we've worked with. We provide multi-channel delivery, as we've touched on. No one individual is exactly the same as another in terms of the way they want to interact. So that could be by phone, it could be remote video. We may need a trainer involved to help them get better understanding of how to use a device, and also in person at the centres and our partners around the countryside. So we're bringing a whole network of the call centres and the partners to bear in this particular instance. Very key to making sure we're identifying any other areas of concern is looking at the signposting. We call this our referral train. And this is where our very qualified call agents are able to identify and spot any particular safeguarding or other emotional needs from the individuals on the phone through careful questioning. And we're able to signpost those to a wide group of other partners around the countryside, local, hopefully to the person that's on the call, to identify how they can get support and help they need in the process or otherwise. And a whole, very important to any of us who've ever been talking to anybody on a phone or trying to organize a meeting or an appointment, is a very smooth transition between each of the elements. We're talking about warm transfers between an agent and a particular centre, being able to book somebody in using their own online system, and actually providing that confirmation of that booking to the individual once that's been done for a particular appointment. They would then get feedback either through a letter or through text to identify what time and date that particular appointment was made for them. So again, keeping it very smooth, keeping the momentum going and making sure the user is engaged through the whole process, so they feel they're actually being looked at and cared for, as opposed to being passed from post to post, which is essential to ensure people actually keep engaging with the process that we're doing. I touched on a bit earlier about the delivery network in a little bit more detail. We're working with a number of organisations that we're going to be delivering through and getting referrals from throughout the countryside. We're able to provide those centres will provide support either from a legal perspective in certain circumstances, because they obviously have the expertise locally. But our objective here is to make sure they're providing the digital support and they're talking with people. So if they walk in, they've got somebody there they can reference to. We are also looking at getting support through the central government as well, in terms of the call centre, the CTSC call centre and National Business Centre from HMCTS, to allow us to bring in referrals that they're actually getting identified directly to them as well. So we're making sure that we've got a full quota of delivery network. And here's some examples of the type of partners that we're looking to work with, as I said, both for referrals and also through actual delivery of the service. I'm not going to go through these in detail. What you can see here in the centre is the 6 key services that are going to be started with the online service through HMCTS: so divorce, probate, social security and child support, civil money claims, help with fees, and the single justice service. In terms of our partners, we have what we class as two levels: key partners and what we call as a long tail, more of the independent partners. The aim here is to ensure that we get the coverage that we need around the country. This isn't about more the merrier. This is about making sure we've got the right levels of service being provided in the areas that need it. Key partners will give us that national coverage and potentially specialist law related services. That means that the user has got that access to the services they may require on the spot. Some of the partners don't necessarily work on a head office basis where they will filter everything down. We will have to work with individual partners locally, which is fine, because they've all got their own individual remits and their own individual accessibility to the communities they work with. And they will get very specific support anyway from us centrally. In terms of the long tail, this these are being brought into play to make sure that we're filling any gaps between the services that are there, to make sure that we've got enough people in the right areas to allow people access to the service they want as easy, as simply as they need. And again, these might be more independent and possibly more regional coverage, and they'll get the same assets and support that we're going to be providing the main partners, but it will be more generic communication as opposed to something that's specifically set up for a large partner. In terms of our triage process, it's all about an end-to-end journey for the user. So from the referral that comes into us, the way we triage them, and how we book them onto the service, as I indicated earlier. The support they're provided with is directly related to what their individual needs are, and we make sure that they're progressed in the right way through the particular service that they've required through our tracking system centrally held within WAD. And we're able to provide reporting to identify specific users and where they're going through those particular outcomes that they've identified. In a little bit more detail, the triage, we just want to make sure that we're getting support to those people that require it. It's all about identifying the right questions to ask, and we're developing that at the moment. That's an ongoing service, and we're going to be testing that with partners, but also any experts in the area. And that's why I think I'd be very interested to speak again with Joe in terms of some of their findings as well around that, because I think this could be vital in terms of what we're trying to make sure we achieve through that process. So anyway, we've been looking for feedback from people from LIPEG as well. So, and anybody else on this call, if anybody would be willing to provide any support around this, always open to suggestions that to make this service better. Just to give you a quick visual in terms of our triage process, and again, I don't want to say that this is the only thing that we're doing, but this just gives you an overview of how it works. So we get a customer referral coming in. We, as you say, look at all the information that's relevant to that particular individual to identify the service that they require, and which we then assess for eligibility for digital support, because there will be people who come through to us who are probably more than capable of doing this themselves. So we're just making sure we're then signposting them in the right direction as well. But anybody who needs a specific digital support will get it. And again, looking at the best option for delivery, whether that be through phone, whether that's through remote video, whether that's through face-to-face, in person at a centre in a particular location. And again, we will then make a booking for that person. We'll update the partner in terms of where that booking is, so they'll know when that person's coming through, and the individual, the user, will get a clear indication of when that booking will happen. So in terms of the hub and spoke, here's more of a visual representation. I want to go into this in too much detail, but theoretically, as you can see, it's about us reaching out to the partner network. We're using them as then their individual hubs. We take referrals in directly as well. There will be people who will come through to us directly that we will deal with, and we'll be able to identify any particular requirements for them to either send those out to the partners. From a partner perspective, they become their individual hub. They've got access to the channels into their marketplaces where they currently get referrals through, the organizations that are influencing people to come to them for support, and we're there to help them. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just helping digitize what's currently available in a mechanism that allows people who want access to the digital service to get that access if they want it. But again, as we said, all other routes are still available to them. In terms of a mobilization period, as I mentioned earlier on, between October and May is when we're going to be setting the whole mobilization up and going live around the country in May, and I'll show you in a couple of slides' time the breakdown of that. We're doing the initial test phase from January to March, and again, this is looking at making sure we're building up and evolving the processes that we're going to be launching in May. So this will be looking at the user journey, making sure we're identifying excuse me, all the elements that need to be seen from the triage process, and taking feedback to how well we're liaising with the individual partners as a result of that. And obviously we'll be developing any of the processes ongoing from that. The initial service will be started with the Social Security and Child Support Service, because this was seen as the one which had the highest demand, and by virtue of the number of users that would potentially have need for these services. But then we'll be rolling out the rest of them across the country as necessary. In the mobilisation period, our test phase is going to be taking place in the West Midlands Combined Authority area, and that covers the towns shown there. And at the moment, we've got a network of 14 delivery partners in that region, and we're going to be looking to set up training and work with them to be able to deliver that particular pilot ongoing. But why the West Midlands Combined Authority? Well, as we can see, it's seen as a pretty good snapshot of what's happening across the country. It's also very local to us. We're based in Coventry, and therefore we're very close to make sure we can do actual personal and very close analysis of what's happening on the ground within those centres. So I'm not going to go through all the details here, but there was clear rationale also why we used it from a demographic perspective as well, from our own needs. And finally, in terms of the rollout, I'm not expecting to take all this in, but this just gives you a view in terms of how the process is going to be rolled out across the countryside and in each of the individual areas that are shown here. And again, I'm happy to share these slides anyway in the chat. So rather than going through that in detail, I will leave it to that. So that's it. I'm sure people have got a lot of questions or a lot of things they might want to ask, but I think we're probably tied some time, Martha. So I'll dip out now if that's all right.
Thanks so much, David. And yeah, there's a couple of people asking questions, but we can always do follow up. There are infinite examples of advice services building in digital assistant to their users when delivering advice. As just one example, I am going to ask Tracy Govan, Tracy Kirkland from the Govan Community Project to give an overview of their device lending library and their new project to train community members as community language digital champions to support their peers with basic digital skills. Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Martha. So our scheme is very small scale and not as glamorous as some of the big techie things we've been hearing about, but Govan Community Projects support people in the asylum process. In Govan and Glasgow, and digital poverty was always an issue, but obviously the pandemic and the lockdown really exacerbated that. So when we first moved to offering remote services, part of the service we provide is asylum support advice and advocacy. So the team worked really hard to, one of the biggest challenges we had was when we had no face-to-face contact with people, how do we get mandates signed to be able to act on people's behalf? Worked with Advice UK, who were members of, around getting ways of having electronic signatures. But very quickly came up the digital poverty issue for our community members, in that we could send things out, but nobody had a device that was capable of receiving or acting on digital signatures, and nobody had access to Wi-Fi either in asylum accommodation. Many of our community members didn't even have an email address. And one of our other crucial services for people who'd newly arrived was our access to community-based English classes. For people who have arrived with absolutely no English, ESOL is a crucial lifeline to being able to access and understand what other services are available and be able to engage with the support that people need. And we did offer face-to-face survival English classes, which we moved online, but again, nobody had devices that were capable of working with Zoom. So we started a device lending scheme. We looked at gifting smartphones and tablets to individuals, but realised that with the very limited resources an organisation our size had, if we gifted the devices, we would only be able to support a finite number of people, and we then wouldn't be able to support new arrivals who come. Our population is fluid because people will move on if they get granted their refugee status, but there was always new people arriving even during lockdown. So we went down the route of organising a device lending scheme. So we currently have on loan about 60 smartphones and tablets to our community members. And because of the issues around access to Wi-Fi, we are also at the moment, although we're not sure for how much longer we can manage it, providing a monthly data allowance, because that was the bigger challenge over and above devices, was that access to data, particularly at the rate that Zoom eats it up. So we have been providing people with a month-by-month contract for their data allowance as well. As well as this, we have been a distribution point for the Scottish Government's Connected Scotland devices, where you could apply for Chromebooks and MiFi devices with 2 years worth of data to give out to vulnerable members of the community. And realised that as well as devices, there was obviously a lot of digital literacy issues. So part of the project was to recruit and employ a digital inclusion assistant who, as well as managing the lending scheme, is there to provide that end user support and helping people set up their devices, understand how to use Zoom, how to use WhatsApp, how to use any other applications, how to set up an email address and then access it. Language barriers were obviously huge during this process, particularly with digital and technological language, which not every community language has the same words for or easy to explain. And we do have an in-house interpreting service, but having that third wheel in the process just made things even more complicated. So while the device lending scheme is going on, the digital inclusion assistant is there to support. The new element of our service is to help upskill our own community members as well. Our digital inclusion assistant is now training some of our community members as community language digital champions, so they can provide that direct support to their peers in their own home language, taking out the need for the third body in the process using an interpreter. The project has had some challenges along the way around language, around data. We know we are unlikely to get all of the devices back. We have a huge waiting list. Now we probably have about 50 people waiting for devices. That's how huge the demand is. Even though we've given out 50 gifted devices. We have also worked with the local Remade network, who have distributed some refurbished desktops to some of our community members, but obviously they don't come with data either. And another challenge we found in this for people in asylum accommodation is if people are living in shared accommodation, they just do not physically have the space in the room for a desk to accommodate a desktop, and they just don't have enough PowerPoints in their rooms either. So we had to end up for those devices having to buy power, extension leads and getting them to people during the lockdown. But the scheme has been very popular and we're in great demand, and we're hoping that the community language digital champions is going to be something that will be sustainable through our community members becoming volunteer digital champions, because most of this has been funded through COVID emergency funding, which is obviously coming to an end now, but it has really highlighted that the issues around digital poverty for our community members, and most of the people we're supporting don't have Wi-Fi. They are not allowed to take out a phone contract. They're not allowed to have a bank account. So even if they had the funds, which they don't because they're living on £5.66 a day, they could not support themselves with data, and they would be extremely excluded, because before lockdown they would come to community centres, libraries, other public spaces to use Wi-Fi, and a lot of places still aren't doing any face-to-face. So we see this being an ongoing issue, which we are constantly trying to raise at kind of government policy level and with the asylum accommodation providers to say, why can't you put shared Wi-Fi into your accommodation, which would at least reduce part of the barriers. So yeah, it's a busy service. We just hope we can manage to sustain it in some way.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That's really interesting, really valuable insights. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing that. And as ever, bringing it back to the point that these things take an incredible amount of investment as well. I'm going to move us on now to referral and signposting systems. So I just wanted to give a really brief outline of what it would be useful, I think, for us to discuss in this session, because I know signposting and referrals have always been such a big issue for us. It's a topic that we revisit very frequently. And I think what we're talking about here is how do we enable our users to navigate different services and systems as effectively and efficiently as possible. And again, we know the practicalities around this, around joining different support services in the user journey together has just been one of the things I think that we're still trying to figure out. So as I said, this is an area of interest, and as such, there's been a lot of activity and a lot of tools and a lot of development in this area. So I just wanted to frame the session with a bit of overview of what already exists, and make this distinction between referrals and signposting, which I think will be helpful. So obviously signposting is directing users to alternate services or alternate sources of support after a bit of initial triage on the problem. And they are usually signposted because they need services that can't be provided by the organisation signposting. Signposting tools can be delivered in a number of different ways, from internally curated and updated lists to public websites where services update their own details, and they can include postcode searches and maps as well, which I know is another topic we revisit often, is the mapping of services and their scope. I thought I'd just give a really brief overview of the ones I'm aware of, but if you have any other examples, please do share them in the chat. I'll pull them together. And I'll be looking at things from kind of a national advice side. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen if we can. Here we go. So yeah, we have a couple of the usual suspects, we kind of say. This is advice local. You can filter by geographic region. You can filter by advice service type. To what extent you're receiving services, and the areas of law as well. In terms of finding alternate services, we also have the Citizens Advice Network. So again, another postcode search that people are directed to. In a similar vein, we have the Law Centres Network kind of map of advice service provision there. And then moving on, I mentioned at the beginning of this session, Advice UK have just updated their website, and this is now their Advice UK members directory. So again, you can see here, you can also filter this by the types of services being provided, the beneficiary types, and the topics of advice, as well as the service type, so to what extent you're getting the service. And we also have the LawWorks Pro Bono Clinics network as well. So you can see here a number of different ways of sharing this information, of opening it up to the public as well. You can see there's varying levels of filtration, and it's not always immediately obvious what the scope of each service is. And that's why I found that local provision is usually also scoped on top of this for signposting lists as well. And that's usually actually the most common way of doing things. And actually it's the signposting to national services, which is maybe not included as much. So we've seen examples of service of scoping locally in service provisions to specific areas, such as the Our Liverpool project, and that provides support for refugees. So I'm going to get Tia to post the link in the chat to that. And I suppose the epitome, which is something we might all be striving for, is something like an all-encompassing service directory. So along the lines of the Alice project in Scotland, so that's a local information system for Scotland. That's delivered by the Health and Social Care Alliance. So again, basically an online public-facing website, which is a directory for lots of support services. The issue with signposting systems, however, are also well known. They are liable to go out of date quickly. There's not a huge level of understanding between organisations about the scope or nature of services beyond what users might search for. And users are still liable to suffer from fallout and fatigue, referral fatigue, and having to still tell their story all over again, beginning at the beginning at each different service. I've walked this through just to make the difference between signposting directories and referral tools really clear. And for me, there's two main parts. So referral systems really rely on different services knowing each other. I think that's a fundamental part of it, both that these services exist and a knowledge and understanding of how they all fit into the referral ecosystem. So when it's appropriate to refer, what services are delivered when, and if there's not operational times or services, what those look like. And the other benefit is that users benefit from an end-to-end referral service, which minimises the amount of duplication, repetition of case facts, duplication of documents, and they'll also be accessing services that they know will certainly help them, rather than people approaching services speculatively. Most of the successful models I've seen have been delivered locally. As I said, there's a whole spectrum of delivery options for referral networks, ranging from really low-tech solutions. The Southwest Access to Justice Roundtable has just started to work up something. I don't have permissions to share what they're doing yet, but I will have a chat to them and see if I can show you, but essentially it's just an Excel spreadsheet. There are white label models also exist, such as ReferNet, and I know ReferNet is used by the Liverpool Access to Advice Network. I know Cozy's here, maybe in the chat. To bespoke models, which is what we're going to have some additional insight into now. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Janet and George, who are going to be speaking on the Coordinated Community Support Project and how they've developed and utilised referral networks. So hopefully, George and Janet, over to you.
Lovely, thank you very much. I will, so George and I are going to talk about the Coordinated Community Support Programme. We can, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview, and then George is going to go into a bit more depth about the digital referral system underpinning it. So, and I think, and this is very much a referral system, as Martha has just described, and also I think it brings out that balance of personal relationships and tech knowledge that was a key feature of the previous presentation. So the quick overview: the Coordinated Community Support Programme is funded by a range of funders, philanthropic funders, and led and delivered by the Children's Society. It's a 3-year programme, and we've just finished year 2. It operates in 4 local authority areas, 3 in England, 1 in Wales, and the objectives are to improve awareness of, access to, and coordination of crisis support. And generally, when we talk about crisis support, we're thinking about financial crisis, but it's not exclusively about finance, and it's not exclusively about advice. It's a much wider scope of support that's engaged in the local areas, and it's a project that brings together organisations in the voluntary sector and local authorities. One of the conditions for being a pilot site was that the local authority was running a resident support scheme, or the DAF in Wales. And the Children's Society team brings partnerships together in the pilot site, supported by a learning coordinator, that's me, and an external evaluation. And that part of the programme is also influencing national policy and practice. So we conceptualise the programme in these 3 tiers: local coordination in the four areas, promoting the value and access to local welfare advice, resident support schemes, both in the local areas, across local government, and with government, and also influencing national policy and practice. And we've broken these 3 tiers out to help us understand really that we're doing all of these 3 things and the interrelationship between them. And a lot of, obviously, what we're doing at tier 1 and tier 2 is addressing some of the gaps in the tier 3 provision benefits and the like. Focusing in on the local delivery, these are our 3 objectives. Driving access to, the key outcome is that more people have access to the services that they need. That's supported by more awareness, both by people using the services directly and organisations in the local area, just as Martha's just described, and coordination. So the coordination work is about bringing organisations in the local area together to work together collaboratively and to refer to each other. And our model suggests our in a sense, our theory of change, which is improved coordination will drive increased awareness and access. And so our emerging description of what leads to effective local coordination is this 3 points. First of all, a network of people who have a shared understanding of the local area. That's the ecology point that Martha just mentioned, and who are motivated to work together for better outcomes. And this concept of leaving your ego at the door has come really important, particularly between voluntary organisations who may have previously competed for funding. I think this is the first point, that actually what we found is this is the prerequisite for driving an effective local system. However, it benefited with an underpinning mechanism that facilitates robust referrals more than just the odd email. So this is about referrals rather than signposting. And this final point here, that this is all supported by the need for someone to have both capacity and legitimacy to lead the network, administer the referral mechanism, and support collaboration. So there's a leadership role that also needs to be in place with capacity and legitimacy. Our key learnings so far: coordination of local services does not create capacity by itself. Funders may think there's duplication in the system. There may or may not be, but better coordination is not the answer to the levels of demand. Organising the slices better doesn't make the cake bigger. We found that the coordination can be from the voluntary sector or the local authority. I have to say this is a contested point. There are people who are strongly of the view on this, that the local authority can play this role, and others who believe it can't. But we've seen examples of both. The key to effective coordination is embedding a network, and these relationships take time, and that coordination has a cost. It doesn't come free. So that's the overview of the programme. And George is now going to talk a bit more about the bespoke referral mechanism that has been used in the projects.
Thanks, Janet, and morning, everyone. Yeah, I will do a really quick demo, but Martha just asked me to kind of talk briefly about some of what we've learned at a local level and build upon what Janet had said. So I think for us, obviously, we're working at a really local level with kind of key organisations to build or underpin those networks where they exist, or starting them where they don't exist. So within the context of somewhere like Norfolk, there was a really well embedded network. I don't know if anybody on the call is from Norfolk and is aware of NCAN, but that Norfolk Community Advice Network is the kind of constant locally, and our work has kind of supported in kind of underpinning that network. And again, in Tower Hamlets, the kind of network existed. So there was a good core group of agencies who had a history of kind of coming together, but what they didn't have was a kind of effective mechanism through which they could share referrals. And in Oldham, no such kind of network existed. But I think the key for us is to find that kind of motivated group and push that network as the single constant in a local area. You know, in a local landscape where the local authority is in constant flux and change, and the offers coming out of the local authority are changing all the time, and actually individuals are changing posts quite frequently. And the same in the voluntary sector, where some of that very, very frontline provision, so, you know, that informal food bank provision or the baby bank that's being run out the back of the community centre or whatever it is, pops up and changes and moves. Trying to create a local network that, as I say, is the single constant has been absolutely kind of critical to our work. So I'm just going to, I mean, quickly, I know Martha mentioned ReferNet, and we're aware of ReferNet, and some people on the call may well be. We spoke with another organisation called Step Search, who are running a kind of live directory and referral process. We, in our local areas, kind of put all of those options to our local leads, because we have independent sort of local leads in each of those spaces. And for whatever reasons, they have chosen this one that I'm going to kind of demo to you. But the key point, I think, is that, you know, the tech is just a tool. It looks lovely and everybody gets very excited about it, but it's just a mechanism. The critical piece to plug into is that network, and having the capacity to promote that network, build that network, train those frontline agencies in understanding how to use it, who to refer to, when to refer, is the absolutely critical bit. The tool is just, you know, a helpful bit to move along. So I will just share my screen quickly and hope that this works. Can everybody see that? I think so.
Great, thanks, George.
So this is just the TCAN website. So this is a website that kind of, well, obviously is for TCAN, and this existed before our referral, but you can see here there's a referral login link here. I'm just going to go into, this is the demo site, and as I say, it's sort of led by Island Advice in Tower Hamlets. And we're just, as I say, rolling it out into the community, and we've taken it into schools, we've taken it to the food banks, we've taken it to, you know, the London Muslim Centre around some of the work the mosques are doing. So trying to reach down into those frontline agencies, and it's a very straightforward system. I'm just going to make a referral by clicking that, and hopefully it will move quickly. We have tried to keep the required boxes to a minimum. We've got these 5 tabs down here, so we'll just, I don't know why we use superheroes, but we do. So those are the only kind of key required boxes. Again, tried to keep it to a minimum. Have to have a number. You can click these boxes if you have those permissions. You can provide an address, or they have no fixed abode. And I'll put no fixed abode, and then you can select the local authority. I should add that in each of these systems, that they are independent systems. So the system that's active in Norfolk doesn't speak to the system that's active in Tower Hamlets. However, what we are kind of looking at is whether or not there is how we can kind of integrate those systems. So we wouldn't want them to be one big system, but we would like the ability, if somebody has moved, we did actually have a case of a lady that had moved from Norfolk to Tower Hamlets, and how were we going to be able to, was there a way we could integrate those systems? Again, these are just sort of free text boxes to make the referral, so people just put kind of key information in relation to the referral. When I click this, I will see a drop down, but that's because I'm in the test site. Individual organizations would only see their organization. Can select whether it's urgent. So if that's like, if there's an imminent threat of eviction or a court date tomorrow, that kind of thing. And then this is the bit that is the important bit. So we have these kind of headline issues, and we can select those, and then all that does is it filters all the agencies that are on the system that can offer support with welfare benefits. And individual agencies, I probably don't have time to go into the detail of this, but individual agencies have the ability to like switch on and off referrals, manage their capacity. They can even say, do you know what, we're a law centre and actually we don't want referrals from the food bank because they're not best placed to kind of understand when an issue needs to go to the law centre. So we only want to accept issues from these very specific advice agencies once that kind of initial triage work has been done. And just lastly, also able to update files again. So, you know, if there is a tenancy agreement or similar, that, you know, can be updated. So I'll just create that referral. And all that's done is bumped me along that tab. And then you can see it's there. So that sends an automated email to the receiving agent. And that receiving agent then is able to go in and address the referral. And at each point where it's been acknowledged or it's been accepted or it's been declined for whatever reason, that system pumps out an automated email to the sender so that you have an idea what's going on with the referral. You're able to clone the referral as well. So perhaps if it's gone to an agent, if it's gone to an agency inappropriately, they can decline it, but say, I'm going to clone it and send it to this agency that can help. I'm very aware of time, so I won't go into and close the referral and all that kind of stuff. But what I will just say is that each individual agency is also able to kind of pull out data from the system in relation to, you know, referrals sent, referrals received, which I think is useful for certainly for smaller voluntary sector agencies to well, to see where they're getting positive outcomes and referrals and so on. And then, as I say, individual agencies are also able to manage their capacity a bit through the system. So I will stop sharing if I can find where that button is. Stop, where is it? I think I've stopped, or someone stopped me. But as I say, that was just an illustration of that system that we're using, and I can't emphasize enough that that's just a tool. You know, ReferNet does very similar things. What we saw with Step Search was a very similar thing. This system in particular was bespokely designed for the work in Norfolk, and what it has done is kind of really helped pull that network together at a local level, but also be able to reach down into that really diverse and, you know, ever-changing voluntary and local authority space. So I hope that's been interesting. Janet and I will be very, very keen to speak to anybody who would like to hear more about the work, about the system. Yeah, and I'll hand back to Martha.
Thank you so much, and thanks to you both for coming to another one of our sessions. I think we could definitely extend this session and do a lot more in-depth walkthroughs. So, but we've run out of time for today. So I just wanted to say another huge thanks to all of our amazing contributors today. Thank you for taking the time to share your learnings and experiences with the rest of the group. The next meeting will be on Thursday, the 10th of March at the same time. 10 till 11:30 a.m. I think we'll be revisiting some hybrid service delivery models, but if there's anything else you wanted to chat about, please do let me know. In the meantime, have a wonderful winter break, and thanks so much to you all again. Bye everyone.